Okay, good morning everyone. As Nick has indicated, I have some introductory remarks just to make first, just to make sure that we have a clear clarity around recent developments and the advice that the Ministry for Primary Industries is providing. To start with, I'd like to just note that the safety and well-being of consumers has been at the forefront of the government's mind throughout, ever since we were notified on Friday afternoon of a food safety issue involving batches of whey protein concentrate that was produced by Fonterra at a single manufacturing plant. Last night, the Ministry for Primary Industries updated our advice about the potential contamination of nutritious Caracare products due to the whey protein issue. I would like to be absolutely clear for all parents and caregivers out there. At this point, the Ministry for Primary Industries cannot rule out that two product lines within the Nutricia Caracare product catalog are potentially contaminated. We therefore recommend that these two product lines are not fed to infants. These lines are Nutricia Caracare Infant Formula Stage 1 for babies from birth. The second product line is Nutricia Caracare Stage 2 Follow-On for children from 6 months old. And these details are fully contained within the statement that I made last night and in the context of the media release associated with it. I think it's important to note that this advice stands regardless of batch numbers. It applies to all batches of these products on the market. I understand to a lot of parents and caregivers that this may seem somewhat contradictory given the information associated with Nutricia's recall, which was focused on specific batches. Nevertheless, it is the Ministry for Primary Industries' best cautionary advice to parents and caregivers at this time. The Ministry for Primary Industries has not been able to fully trace and track through Nutricia's supply chain which specific batches of its products may contain the contaminated whey protein and which do not, and whether affected batches are in New Zealand stores or not. It may be over the coming days that Nutricia and Fonterra can provide us with information which would allow me, as the Acting Director General, to be assured of the safety of these products. But in the meantime, caution is necessary. As I have said, the safety and well-being of consumers are at the forefront of our minds. I would also like to be quite clear that we expect information to change. I am not ruling out a further update to my advice either later today or tomorrow. In this regard, I would just note that Fonterra provided the Ministry for Primary Industries and Nutricia with new information this morning, which may have important implications. I will update you as soon as we have had an opportunity to clarify the implications of this new information. I would also encourage all parents and caregivers to monitor the Ministry for Primary Industries website or our Twitter feed for any further information. I would also like to note that we are working with Fonterra and all of its customers to verify all of the information which we are receiving. In this regard, I would note that MPI, as soon as we were notified, have already visited the manufacturing plant in Hautapu to verify that that line is no longer in use. We are also working closely with Fonterra, and some of our staff, with Fonterra's agreement, will be visiting their offices today to work through all of the source material to make sure we can verify all of the information for the benefit of consumers. I would also like to probably touch upon two other aspects which I'm sure people have some questions on, but I would like to make sure that I provide you with that advice up front. Firstly, I'm aware that there are questions around supply of infant formula on the New Zealand market. On the back of discussions that we're having with retailers and manufacturers and the wider industry, the Ministry for Primary Industries understands there are presently no concerns around the supply of infant formula for New Zealand. But we are absolutely committed and focused to work with manufacturers and retailers, monitoring that situation as things develop. The other issue I'd probably like to touch upon is in relation to overseas markets. New Zealand officials are working hard to get information to relevant authorities in our overseas markets. And it is probably worth clarifying what the situation currently is. We do face some market closures. Russia, for example, appears to have put a temporary ban on all New Zealand dairy products. We are focused on getting further clarity on this. The Chinese authorities have suspended imports of Fonterra-produced whey powder and dairy-based powder, and increased inspection and supervision at the border for New Zealand dairy products. I would like to emphasize that this is a measured, targeted, and appropriate response in the circumstances on the basis of the information that ourselves and the Chinese authorities currently have. China has not closed the market to all New Zealand dairy products. It has been quite specific about the range of Fonterra products which it has temporarily suspended. The Chinese authorities still have a number of questions which we are wanting to work with them on to respond to. In terms of other markets, we have a range of information requests from those markets. I understand and appreciate that there might have been some inaccurate media reports in foreign markets. At this stage, we are not aware of any additional market closures, but we are focused on working closely with our counterparts in all overseas markets to ensure that we can respond to any information requests they have, and also to highlight where any information gaps are. We can now have some questions if you'd like.
Do you not trust the information that Fonterra is giving you? Why did you have to go to Hautapu? I mean, did you not believe that they had fixed the problem?
What we're seeing ever since we were notified on Friday afternoon is a rapidly evolving state of information. Uppermost in our minds is the safety and well-being of consumers. And we need to make sure that the information which we have, we've been able to verify what it is telling us and what that means for the consumers and also overseas markets. And so I think it would be very appropriate, and I think anyone in terms of the public, whether it's in New Zealand or overseas, would expect us to have a sense of being able to verify what the information is telling us.
Has Fonterra been supplying you with improved information, or information which has subsequently turned out to be improved?
The information that we've been receiving has changed over the last 60 to 65 hours since we were notified on Friday afternoon. The implications of these changes we are monitoring and having to get to grips with. Fundamentally, what we are focused upon is as soon as we are aware of the significance or implications of any information, we are wanting to share that with the public to ensure that we have the consumer health and well-being at the forefront of our thinking.
Can you be any more specific about the new information that Fonterra has provided today? And does it relate to the trail of the product and the batch numbers?
It does. It relates to the trail or sort of the scope of ingredients which had been provided to Nutricia. And so obviously from the Ministry for Primary Industries perspective and Nutricia's perspective, we are wanting to make sure we can track where those ingredients are and whether the new information we've received can allow us to narrow the sort of scope of where we may find contaminated product within the Nutricia Carry Care product range.
Do you expect to make some more recalls? You say information could change, you expect another update later today or tomorrow. Some people might look at that and think, are you going to be recalling more, issuing more safety recalls later today or tomorrow?
Probably useful just to bear in mind that I have been exercising my authority under the Animal Products Act and the Food Act to issue statements. These statements are advisory statements to all consumers indicating the concerns we have and our recommendations.
Now joining the conference, John.
Our recommendations that parents and caregivers should move to alternative products from the 2 product lines I've identified in my statement from Nutricia Carry Care. Things are evolving, and what we've seen over the last 2 days since Friday afternoon is that the information has changed on us, which means my updates are having to change appropriately.
Are you able to say no, I don't expect to be doing any more precautionary advice? Or
At this stage, and as I indicated today, I am expecting that I will be issuing another update. The precise scope of that update I am not clear on because we're still assessing the implications of the recent information we've received from Fonterra in terms of what it means for the products from the Nutricia Carry Care range.
why is the situation still changing?
I think that's a very fair question. That is the questions that we have, and they're the questions that we are directing to Fonterra at the moment.
Is there more contaminated product? Is that it? That they've told you that there's more contaminated product?
No, I want to be very clear on that. I think it's important that we bear in mind, on the basis of all of the information that we have at the moment, we are still dealing with the original contaminated 3 batches from the Hautapu plant. What we're dealing with is in terms of where that original contaminated product ended up through the Fonterra supply chain, including to customers. And that's what we're working on.
Are you likely to broaden the scope of countries or products?
At this stage, in terms of the scope of countries which we've already talked about and the products, that still stands. But I think it's very important that we do appreciate that this is an evolving situation. We are hoping over time, as we get to verify information, that the scope and the width of what we're talking about can start to narrow. But at the moment, we don't have that information to hand at the moment.
It's obviously been pretty anxious for parents in this country and others. Are you satisfied with the way that you've communicated this to New Zealanders and our overseas markets?
Absolutely. At the forefront of our minds has been the safety and well-being of all consumers, and also the parents and caregivers, giving them accurate information. As soon as we have had any information, we have been wanting to communicate that to parents and caregivers and the wider consumers.
What's happening to the product that's on its way or has arrived from China right now from Fonterra?
All of that product is clearly being tracked, but as I said, in the context of the Chinese market, the Chinese authorities have clearly issued a temporary suspension on all Fonterra product in terms of it entering the market or crossing the border if that product contains whey protein or milk powder.
What has this done to New Zealand's reputation for providing top quality milk products to the world?
Well, I think, and if you reflect upon a lot of the observations we've seen over the weekend, questions are being asked. What we are focused upon is ensuring that we can respond as quickly as possible to the information we have to provide certainty and clarity to consumers and overseas markets. And I think the quicker that we can work to provide that certainty and clarity, the more that will reinforce the ability of the New Zealand government and the New Zealand food safety system, and more generally our market, to respond to these issues as they arise.
Are there any plans to negotiate, to talk directly with China? Are you sending a delegation there, or MPI officials visiting the Chinese consulate?
Look, I'm sorry, I missed the start of your question.
Are there any plans to deal directly with China? Are you going to send, like you did with the meat blockade, are they going to officials visit Beijing and smooth things over there about this?
Ever since we were notified on Friday, the New Zealand government has been in significant and substantive discussions with our counterparts in China, and absolutely focused on making sure we provide the right sort of information to the Chinese authorities. And those discussions are between New Zealand government officials and the Chinese authorities.
Now leaving
Can you
the
tell
conference.
us what you know about overseas recalls?
Right? In terms of the precise list of that, I don't have the full details to mind, but I'm sure as soon as this is finished, we will provide you with all of the information we have in terms of the scale of overseas recalls. Just on the recall front, probably useful just to bear in mind that recalls take a number of ways, and a number of dynamics of recalls are in play. Some are initiated, most have been initiated by the companies themselves, and then we're also seeing overseas authorities have initiated that as well. So we can provide all of the information we have to hand following on from this conference.
One more minute, folks, because we're running out of time.
Have you had any new reports of illness connected with this, and since there's been all this publicity?
As of this morning, and I'll probably just, because the only information I have is in relation to New Zealand. As of this morning, we have had no notified instances or cases of any infants or babies in New Zealand being sick in terms of infant botulism or any other associated disease or the like. And that's of this morning, and obviously one of the key things which we focused upon as soon as we were notified of this on Friday afternoon was to ensure, in terms of the government response to this, that it is a multi-agency, cross-government response. And so within the government response, it is the Ministry for Primary Industries, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. And as things develop, we're very much focused on ensuring that across government we have all of our resources and requisite skills brought to bear to respond to this as quickly as we can.
Have you sought any answers from Fonterra about the delay of letting MPI know? And if not, when will you be seeking those answers?
Ever since we were notified on Friday afternoon, we have had a number of conversations with Fonterra, and there are a number of questions that we have over the timeliness and the timetable leading up to our notification on Friday afternoon. But at the moment, clearly there are important questions, and we're wanting to get the right answers to that. But at the moment, we are fully focused on making sure we deal with the here and now and ensure that we are providing the right sort of information to all consumers.
Last question, folks.
Has Fonterra followed proper process with this notification?
We have asked questions. We've yet to get to the bottom of the full scope of the time frame and the timetable, but clearly that is the sort of question which we're asking ourselves and which we're asking Fonterra.
We'll wrap it up there, folks. If you've got any additional information requests or anything, come and see